Hey everyone, so I'm going to talk about comfort. Now you might think comfort sounds a bit weird, we're talking about racing. What has comfort got to do with it? Well, if we were talking about sort of race preparation for a time trial or a track event, we'd be talking about aerodynamics. Now if we think about we're preparing for an ultra endurance event, let's compare aerodynamics with comfort. So obviously it's pretty well known that aerodynamics is the most important thing if you want to go fast and just all out fast. Well, it's my opinion from experience that if you want to go all out fast for ultra endurance, so we're talking, days, 1 to anything, 40, 50, even longer. And the longer it is, the more important it'll be. Comfort is the most important thing to look at when preparing, not aerodynamics, as people often get confused about. If we're going to talk about comfort, there are sort of a few things to look at. You have the bike, you have the setup of the bike, you have the system, so your general sort of system, and then you have fatigue limitation. Okay, so the bike, obviously, having looked at our analysis, the terrain and topography is going to determine the sort of bike we're using. So if it's a road event like Transcontinental or Transiberica or Trans Am, then you're going to want to be on a road bike, perhaps with sort of some time trial bars, thinner tyres. You're not going to need even gravel tyres. Whereas if you start to go completely off-road to sort of Silk Road mountain race, you're going to be between maybe a gravel bike and a mountain bike. And if you go full on mountain bikes, so the Colorado Trail Race, Arizona Trail Race, Highland Trail 550, again, proper full on mountain bike setup, front and probably, possibly rear suspension, and that's going to become a question for you to answer. Now, what you might think of being the fastest bike for that event isn't necessarily the fastest when you're looking at the long time scale, multiple days, because this is where comfort comes into it. And if we start to think about bike setup, we're going to be looking at bike fit, and this is one of the most important things. If you're going to be able to ride on your bike for multiple days, you need a very good bike fit, and you need to think about the contact points, so saddle, hands, and pedals. Now actually, a lot of people fit aerodynamic TT, triathlon bars, whatever you want to call them, to your road bike for road racing, ultra endurance road racing that is, thinking that it's for the aerodynamic position. Consider this though, when I did a bike fit with Yorit at now Striped Street Cycles, we found that the saddle pressure and using pressure mapping reduced by 15% as I rotated forward into triathlon time trial bars. So it's not necessarily about the aerodynamics, because you're not really travelling at speeds where aerodynamics are a benefit, it's about the comfort. And for me, it was such a huge reduction, 15%, that it made a massive difference. So you've got to come at things from the comfort perspective rather than aerodynamics perspective. Because we're talking about speeds where aerodynamics doesn't matter. But what we are talking about durations where comfort matters, because of the fatigue limitation. So to look at setup, so to talk about system. Now, the important thing with system is how things work on your bicycle, okay? So we've talked about sort of getting the bike fit right, but now what about the system whereby sort of your access to stuff when you're riding along? So say it's getting cold and you need your gloves. If you don't put your gloves on, your hands might get cold, and how's that going to affect you? Is it going to cause you a bit more fatigue? Or if you're, not getting a hat on or some food in you, how's that going to affect your comfort levels and your fatigue levels? So you need to be thinking where positioning a bike bag. With the frame bag that I run on the mountain bike, it's quite quick and easy to get stuff out. Or I have my water in here, which means I don't have my water on my back or other areas, so that's reducing sort of extra fatigue from that. A lot of people sort of don't wear gloves and things, but you need to think about, okay, and I often don't wear gloves if I'm riding for a few hours, but if I'm riding for days, I now have sort of nerve damage in my left hand that I've sustained from road racing, from the constant pounding. So you've got to give thought to how, okay, this might work for a couple of hours, but how does it start to look over multiple days, and what effect is that going to have? As the most important sort of point that we come on to is fatigue limitation. Okay, and I've called it limitation because you're always going to get fatigued, but it's about how do I reduce that. And for example, if you're not wearing gloves, over multiple days, that small amount of fatigue on your hands is going to add up, and it might get to the point where you can't really shift gears very well. And this is the point whereby on this mountain bike, for example, I'm running Shimano XTR. Okay, so it's the most expensive group set, and I spent the money on that. Now, I didn't buy it because it's the lightest or the fastest shifting or anything like that. I bought it because the shifting actuation on the lever is the lightest. So the amount of force you need to put through the shifter when pressing it is the lowest possible, therefore reducing the amount of potential fatigue through force on my finger when you're shifting multiple, thousands of times over the period of a few days. It also has a thumb shifter and a finger shifter as well for up and down, so you're immediately halving the amount of effort shifting takes. So it's these small things that you can think about to help reduce fatigue that's going to help you feel more comfortable to be stronger throughout the period of the race. Okay? I got my notes, so let me just double check. There was something else I wanted to say. I think the main point is, though, that when you come at this, you don't want to think about how I can go fastest at the start of the race. You want to think about how can I be going fastest at the end of the race. Now, there are 2 points to that. One, you need to get to the end of the race, the last few days, okay? And two, you need to still be feeling decent then. And what we're doing, racing bicycles over multiple days, is already hard enough on the body, the physical toil of that. And so you want to think about how can I reduce that physical effort, the fatigue that I'm going to be gaining, so that I can feel better towards the end of the race. Because that will allow you to, one, to enjoy it more, because you're feeling less fatigued, and two, to be stronger. Because that fatigue might add up to end up in eventual failure. You can't train for an ultra endurance race, really. It's not possible. You can't mirror it in training. So you have to try and think outside of the box about what else you can do. You could do gym work to help build the core strength, to help stand, manage to sit in that position. You don't want to have the most aerodynamic, bent over hunch position, because that's going to cause extra fatigue on your upper back, and it might cause, strain down your glutes and your hamstrings. So you've got to change everything up. And so when you do go see a bike fitter, make sure that they're understanding about what it is you are doing. And it is all in well being fast, but it's more important to be, comfortable so that you can make it to the end of one of these races. So if you've got any questions about that, get in touch, and I'd be happy to talk a bit more. Cheers.